Hey guys, welcome back. This is the MMA Breakdown. Today we're doing predictions for UFC Fight Night 67, Condit versus Alves. Real quick, I want to say I made a Twitter account for this channel. Go follow me there. I'll leave a link in the description box or an annotation. But yeah, go follow me there. Just something I'm trying to do to help grow this channel, get more viewers, get more followers. This weekend during UFC 187, I plan to be tweeting during the event. So if you could follow me, that would be great. And I'd love to converse with some of you guys, and I think it would just be fun. So go check that out. But Fight Night 67, Condit versus Alves. The main and co-main events, main and co-main event fights here are really good. The rest of the card is typical Fight Night filler that we've gotten accustomed to, and to me this highlights what's wrong with the current era of UFC international expansion and fights every weekend. Coming off of UFC 187 the very next weekend, we don't need another event. Let UFC 187, a really stacked, great card, let that simmer down and sink in. Give us some time to process that. I think the New Orleans Fight Night card coming up is very good, but this, to me, is not necessary at all, especially coming off such a big weekend. Throw Condit and Alves and Lentz Oliveira, throw those fights on a bigger event, and I don't think you need an event for the rest of these fights. But anyways, starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card at welterweight, Luis Dutra versus Tom Breeze. Luis Dutra, veteran from Tough Brazil 2. I think he won his fight in the house and got injured, and then didn't fight in the finale, but fought Kiichi Kunimoto. That was January of last year. Hasn't fought since then, but in that fight, landed some illegal elbows. Kunimoto was trying to go for a takedown, had him up against the fence, and he landed several illegal elbows, I think to the back of the head, that put him out, and fight was called off, so he didn't really get to see much there. And then Tom Breeze, a newcomer that I don't know, so we're going to move on to the next fight. Women's strawweight, Juliana Lima versus Erica Almeida. Erica Almeida, another newcomer, and Juliana Lima fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her debut and got outstruck on the feet. Really didn't do much. I think landed a takedown in the third round, but Jędrzejczyk got right back up. Didn't look too good, but of course, Jędrzejczyk is the champion now. And then her last fight against Nina Ansaroff was pretty dominant with the wrestling and the grappling. Won a pretty clear-cut decision. So I think she has some decent takedown and grappling ability. But again, Almeida, newcomer, can't make a pick here, and we're going to move on. Fox Sports 1 preliminary card at featherweight, Lucas Martins versus Mirsad Bektic. This is a decent fight, I think. Lucas Martins looked really good in some of his earlier fights. When guys are willing to strike with him, he does very well. Made that evident, from some of his first fights in the UFC. Knocked out Jeremy Larson, knocked down Junior Hernandez before submitting him, knocked out Alex White a couple fights ago, but in his last fight against Darren Elkins, Elkins really kind of exposed his inability to fend off a wrestler. I don't think Elkins took him down a whole bunch from what I remember, but he was constantly pressing him up against the fence, getting in on his legs, attempting takedowns, and just kind of holding that position and landing some strikes from the clinch as well and from in close. And a guy like Bektic, who seems to be a grappling-based fighter, out-grappled Chaz Skelly, who's a talented grappler in his debut, and then in his last fight completely dominated, who was it, the Irish guy, Paul Redmond, out-wrestled him for a very dominant decision win. I think he can do that to Martins. On the feet, of course, I give Martins a huge advantage, but the way Elkins was able to just close that distance, put him up against the fence, put pressure on him, I think Bektic has shown he's a good enough wrestler. I think he can get Martins down and out-wrestle him for the decision. So I'm going with Bektic to win a decision here. Next up at welterweight, Elisu Zaleski dos Santos versus Nicholas Dalby. Two newcomers, and we're going to move on. Next up at flyweight, Jussier Formiga versus Wilson Hice. This is a great fight, and it really blows my mind why this is not on the main card. I mean, these are two really talented guys. I know Formiga's not a very exciting guy, but coming off of a win over Zach Makovsky, and Wilson Hice doing very well as well, coming off of a dominant quick submission win over Scott Jorgensen. It's not, and especially because, it's a Fox Sports 1 card, the main card and the prelims. It's not like a pay-per-view situation where sometimes they put the big contender fight on Fox Sports 1 to highlight those guys. So this is really kind of a blunder on the UFC's part, I think. But this should be a really great fight. Two very talented grapplers, and both really grappling-based fighters. Formiga, not a good striker. He's been knocked out by John Dodson. Was knocked out in the first round pretty quickly by Joseph Benavidez. Wilson Hice had a competitive fight at bantamweight before he dropped down against Yuri Alcantara, where I thought he competed very well. Lost the decision, but I thought it was razor thin. Actually dropped Alcantara early in that fight, and it was a back and forth scramble fest the rest of the way. But both guys really talented grapplers. Hice, when he dropped to flyweight, took on Joby Sanchez, where he dominated for the most part, was able to get his back standing, attempted the rear naked choke, got dropped with a head kick later in the fight, which didn't look too good, but recovered. And then his next fight against Scott Jorgensen looked a lot better, a lot more dominant, took him down easily and got the arm triangle finish. And Jussier Formiga also faced Scott Jorgensen a couple fights ago. I think Jorgensen went down from a headbutt, but you see that once it hits the ground, this guy's really slick, took his back, got the body triangle, and subbed him out. And then his last fight against Zach Makovsky, really dominated him, and it was very surprising. Usually a tough, strong wrestler can nullify a good grappler's jiu-jitsu game, but Formiga just totally out-grappled him, took his back, and won all the scrambles. I thought it was really great. So I think Hice has to make this a bit of a stand-up fight, or kind of hold top position if he can to win this, because otherwise I just see Formiga being the better scrambler and just technically more sound and slick on the ground. Both guys very talented grapplers, but I think Formiga's just a little better, and I have to give him the edge. And Hice hasn't shown great stand-up, so I'm going to go with Formiga to win a decision, just out-positioning, out-grappling Hice, but I could see Hice winning, but Formiga I just think is technically a little more sharp with his grappling. So I got to go with Formiga. And last fight on the Fox Sports 1 prelim card at featherweight, Honey Jason versus Damon Jackson. Honey Jason coming off of a year-long layoff. Lost to Robbie Peralta in a really surprising fight. Surprising loss. I picked him to win that fight, and he just mentally didn't quite seem to have it all together. Didn't seem like he really had a game plan. Peralta was outstriking him on the feet. He was putting combinations together, and Jason didn't really have an answer for it. And even when it hit the ground, where I thought Jason would have a big advantage, I think at one point even got Peralta's back very briefly, but Peralta was able to get out of it, and I think he spent some time in top position. But in some of his previous fights, I think Honey Jason has looked pretty good. Showed power, putting out Steven Seiler on the feet pretty easily. Also knocked out Sam Sicilia early in his UFC career. Winner of Tough Brazil 1, by the way, over Godofredo Castro. But Honey Jason, I think, has skills, but just has to focus on the game plan part a bit more. Also had a nice submission win over Mike Wilkinson a couple years ago. And I think he's just going to be a more skilled fighter here than Damon Jackson, who I believe is a wrestler. Beat Leonard Garcia to get into the UFC, and then fought Yancy Medeiros on short notice and a weight class up. Fought at lightweight. I believe that was at lightweight, but was that yeah, that was at lightweight, and didn't impress me at all. I mean, again, short notice and fighting a weight class up, but got dominated badly by Medeiros and got choked out, choked unconscious with a really nasty guillotine choke. So I think Damon Jackson, he might be good enough to out wrestle Honey Jason, but I just see Jason having, more skills in the stand-up and grappling, and it's in Brazil too. This is kind of do or die for him. This would be a pretty bad loss, I think, coming off of the loss to Peralta. So I'm going to go with Honey Jason. All right, moving on to the main card at welterweight, Wendell Oliveira versus Darren Till. Darren Till, another newcomer that I don't know, and Wendell Oliveira fought Santiago Ponzinibbio in his debut. They were both trading bombs, and Santiago was able to get to him first and put him out, and was supposed to fight TJ Waldberger, I think, even at this event, but I think he fell out. But yeah, I don't know Darren Till, but Oliveira looks like a big, strong brawler, but we're going to move on. At lightweight, Norman Parke versus Francisco Trinaldo. Norman Parke, this guy's gotten a lot of hype, and I don't really understand why. I watched him on Tough Smashes. He beat completely undersized Richie Vasilik, who's now fighting at flyweight and was competing at lightweight on the show, which is pretty crazy to think about. I can't remember who the other guy he beat in the house was. And then the UFC, has beaten some okay guys. Doesn't really have a signature win over any really great competition. He's not like a guy like Gastelum coming off of Tough, who's beaten some top guys. I thought the win over John Tuck was good, although I thought his striking seemed a little basic and a little stiff. But to me, his biggest asset is his pace and his aggression and his forward pressure. But the rest of the skills just don't seem to be there. He got the finish over Naoki Katani, but what does that really mean? That guy was finished by Jan Cabral in his last fight. And Trinaldo, if his age hasn't caught up to him yet, I just see him being a way more dynamic and skilled kickboxer, bigger and stronger. He's also a pretty strong grappler, and I think he can take Parke down, and I think he can do enough on the feet to outpoint him. In Parke's last fight against Gleison Tebow, it's not like Tebow was lighting him up, but he just kind of held back and landed a shot when he needed to, and Parke just couldn't do anything. It just seemed flat and had no answer for Tebow, who's not even a great striker, and he wasn't taking him down either. I don't think he took him down at all in that fight, but I see Trinaldo being the more skilled guy. I'm going to take Trinaldo to win it, but with Trinaldo, a guy who competed at middleweight on Tough Brazil 1 and now fighting at lightweight, and for some time now he's been able to make the weight, but also an older guy. I believe he's 35 at least. He's 36. A couple of times he's faded in his fights. The fight against Piotr Hallman, where he started out really strong and just kind of fell apart, got subbed out. I think there were some other fights where he gassed late. I think the Jesse Ronson fight, he started to fade a bit as well in the third round. But if Parke can hang around and he starts to fade in the third round, I could see Parke, coming on strong and big in the third round, possibly, doing enough to get a finish or stealing the fight. But you saw his last two fights against Akbar Arreola and Leandro Silva. Trinaldo's been pretty sound and, able to impose his grappling and his size on guys, and pretty good with the kickboxing. So I'm going to take Trinaldo here, but I don't think Parke is a terrible bet. Moving on to light heavyweight fight, Francimar Barroso versus Ryan Jimmo. This to me is going to be just a terrible fight. Francimar Barroso, he fought Trinaldo Oliveira in his debut. That was a couple years ago. Has only fought once since then, and that was a terrible fight. I remember that both guys just looking like they didn't belong in the UFC at all. And then lost to Hans Stringer in his last fight on the feet, which isn't a good thing. And then Ryan Jimmo, the guy has skills, but the way he's just had these freak injuries in several of his fights, I just can't trust him to ever consistently perform well. His last fight against Ovince St. Preux, had an arm injury. I think it was he got one arm cranked, and it was the other arm that he injured, I think. And against Manua, he just seemed to have his legs seemed to give out on him out of nowhere in the middle of the fight. And but he does have knockout power. Knocked out Sean O'Connell a couple fights ago. Knocked out Anthony Peroche a couple years ago. So has knockout power. Has also shown a bit of grappling. Out-grappled Igor Pokrayets. But I just think there's no way that Barroso can pull out a win here. I think Jimmo's far more skilled. Barroso just looks like he doesn't belong in the UFC, and Jimmo has knockout power and is a skilled guy, even if he doesn't always have a sense of urgency. The fight against Igor Pokrayets was really kind of disappointing how much he coasted in that fight. But I got to go with Jimmo here. All right, at welterweight, KJ Nunes versus Alex Oliveira. This should be a really great fight. I think Nunes was supposed to fight Jan Cabral here, and this is, to me, a way better matchup. But Alex Cowboy Oliveira, coming off of his loss to Gilbert Burns, where he was actually dominating the entire fight in the stand-up, and just in the last, in the third round, Burns came on with his grappling, was able to get him down and sub him out with an armbar. But before that, was looking great on the feet. KJ Nunes had, I thought, a bit of a resurgence late career when he knocked out Sam Stout, although Sam Stout hasn't gone on to do anything good since then, and got knocked out his last fight as well. But knocked out Sam Stout there. Had a very lackluster decision win in a pretty uneventful fight against Soteropoulos. And his last fight against Cruikshank, nothing really happened. There was the eye poke. It was stopped. I thought he was going to get hurt sooner before that point against Cruikshank. I picked him to lose, but hung in there pretty well. It's good head movement and kind of a crafty boxer. But you saw against Donald Cerrone, and did Ryan he beat Ryan Couture, but against he lost to Ryan Couture, but that's the fight where he got robbed. But you saw against Donald Cerrone, a more dynamic striker, just totally picked him apart and really put a beating on him. So I think a guy like Alex Oliveira, who showed he has a really good jab and sharp striking, I think that's going to be enough. A young up-and-coming guy to get past KJ Nunes, who to me was never really an elite fighter. I know he fought Nick Diaz back in Strikeforce a couple of times, but just hasn't really been on the rise in the UFC. So I'm going to go with Oliveira to win a decision here. I think he does enough on the feet, showed good enough striking in his last fight where I think he can outstrike Nunes. All right, on to the co-main event, Nick Lentz versus Charles Oliveira. The rematch that's been, 4 years now in the making. Look, Nick Lentz got dominated the first time around. I know Oliveira landed an illegal kick, or a knee, I think, to the head when Lentz was on his knees in that fight, and that led to the submission win. But was that a submission win? I think it was. I thought it was a submission win, but maybe not. But I think Lentz has just really been overrated by a lot of people coming down to featherweight. He's a good fighter, good wrestler, and I think, you know, the move was good, but he hasn't really become a contender. I know he was on a losing streak at lightweight before he dropped down, but, you know, finished Eiji Mitsuoka, which, you know, and he looked good, really dominant in that fight, but, you know, that guy's long gone. And the fights against Diego Nunes and Hakran Diaz was able to get the guys down and pose his wrestling, but in both of those fights, whenever the fight was on the feet for any length of time, he was getting he was in big trouble on the feet. You know, moving backwards, really can't trade with the guys, and always seems to give the third round away. And you know, when it's on the feet, he does not do well. The Chad Mendes fight, you know, Mendes wasn't himself in that fight, and you know, went the distance, but Lentz still lost pretty clearly. And then his last fight against Manny Gamburian, which was a year ago, you know, can't even get a dominant win over Gamburian at this point. I mean, I think that's his ceiling right there. And even got tagged one time by Gamburian, put him on skates. And, you know, if he's not able to impose his wrestling and his ground and pound against a guy like Gamburian, I don't see him doing that at all against Charles Oliveira, who does have those signature wins over, you know, big names. Recently, finishing Hatsu Hioki, submitting him. And his last fight looked spectacular against Jeremy Stevens. You know, anytime he blew me away in that fight. Anytime that Stevens got within arm's reach, instantly within a matter of seconds, he was fighting for his life to defend against a submission from Oliveira. Very effective at getting the fight to the ground, and just such a submission threat once it hits the ground. He's even you know, gone to his back, pulled guard several times in his career. I think did that real early in his first fight against Darren Elkins. It looks like, you know, he gets slammed big, but I think that's him pulling guard, letting guys take him down. I think did that a bit against Andy Ogle as well. But Oliveira, really a special submission guy. You know, had the setbacks to Frankie Edgar in a fight that was actually kind of competitive. Got knocked out by Cub Swanson, but, you know, since then, and even I thought against Andy Ogle didn't look all that great, but his last two fights against Hioki and Stevens really looked great. And I think, you know, he dominated Lentz 4 years ago. I think he's going to do the same here. Lentz hasn't fought in over a year and really hasn't looked that dominant at featherweight. Not a finisher. Oliveira is a finisher, and I think he's just going to hurt Lentz on the feet. I think he has, you know, far more technical and dangerous striking, and will hurt Lentz and submit him on the ground easily. Alright, on to the main event at welterweight, Carlos Condit versus Thiago Alves. This fight, this is a great matchup, and I know I said I'm kind of down on this event, but this is just a really great matchup. You know, Condit coming back, though, from his layoff and his injury to Tyron Woodley, I'm really kind of skeptical, and, you know, how that's affected him. You know, how his knee is going to hold up. But if this is typical Carlos Condit, I just see him having no problem with Alves. You know, I would have picked him easily without any hesitation if this was, you know, a year ago or at any point before the last year. But, you know, Alves, and I say that because Alves, you saw his last fight against Jordan Meehan, was really kind of crumbling under the pressure, eating a lot of shots. But showed that he's, you know, really dangerous, can land that one shot to put his opponent down, and did that against Meehan with the body kick. Was pretty impressive. His comeback fight before that against Baczynski was not too good. You know, I just thought it was kind of lackluster, but got the win there. And both these guys have fought Martin Kampmann, and you just see the difference. Condit just got stronger and stronger as that fight went on, and completely beat him up and destroyed him whereas Alves, had some moments, was doing well, but went for a takedown late in the fight and got guillotined. So I think Condit, if he's his normal self, will have a huge advantage on the feet with the pressure and the combinations. Alves really loads up on all of his shots, looks to land, the big punch, focuses on power more so than speed and accuracy. And I think Condit would be more of a submission threat as well, who has a very good guard. But again, coming back from the year-long layoff, the injury to Woodley, and Alves having a bit of momentum after the win over Meehan, I think that makes it a much closer fight. And also, I wouldn't be surprised here if Alves tries to win on takedowns. You saw Condit really struggled. That's really been exposed over the last couple of years. Starting with the the GSP fight, got out-wrestled. Then Hendricks out-wrestled him, and even in the Campman fight, got taken down. And Woodley took him down a few times as well. So, we saw Alves take Campman down. So I wouldn't be surprised if Alves tries to out-wrestle Condit here. But I think this should be just a real fun fight, a barn burner. But I got to go with Condit. I'm not going to count on him being, really diminished from the injury and the layoff. I'm going to think he's going to come back strong. And, I just got to go with, what we've seen from these guys based on their skills. So I'm going to take Condit to win this fight. But, if he's hesitant, if that knee isn't fully healed, watch out. Could be a big win for Alves. All right, guys, those are my predictions for Condit for Fight Night 67, Condit versus Alves. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have a recap for UFC 186 and for this event as well. My plan is to have predictions out early for all of the fights, forever, but definitely for this summer, and I'm trying to do recaps for all of the events as well. I'm still trying to do a recap for the last, the Philippines Fight Night card. Check that out. And remember to follow me on Twitter. I'll leave the link down below and probably an annotation as well. Thank you guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.